The people in charge right now are evil, murderous, and they've been ruling this country with oppression.
So then you just take them out?
Let's go back to what I was saying earlier, that the Israeli...
Even in the statement with Axios.
He's actually said directly.
I'm sorry, even in the Axios. But I'm sorry, the quote from Axios
Explain how
was going to personally choose.
A lot of you guys in my comments have had a lot of things to say about Jason Rantz, but I no doubt believe that you're going to have so much more to say. In this clip, we're going to see the panel discussing the legitimacy of Donald Trump's war in Iran, but Jason Rantz makes a statement that leaves the entire panel confused, dumbfounded, and completely baffled as to what he's talking about. As usual, let's watch the clip in full. I will give a bit of my perspective halfway through, but I'm going to save it majority towards the end. Let's get into it.
Good evening. I'm Phillip in New York. We begin with breaking news in the war. The United States military tonight says that it struck an Iranian drone carrier. Central Command is claiming that that ship was the size of a World War II aircraft. And the attack is an effort to sink Iran's entire navy. Now, this is coming as the administration's rhetoric is getting more intense. The president says that the operation is ahead of schedule, and he calls on the Revolutionary Guard to lay down its arms in order to stay alive. But Trump is also undercutting his own message. 3 days ago, the White House assured Americans that this was not a regime change war. But in a new interview, Trump says that he must personally have a role in picking Iran's new leader. He rejected the possibility that the son of the slain supreme leader will take over. He called him a lightweight. Now, it's worth noting, of course, that from Cuba to Afghanistan to Iraq and, yes, Iran, the U.S. has a long and complicated history when it comes to regime change, and that is to put it mildly. Earlier in the week, I just want to remind people that the administration said that they thought that there were other people that they might be okay with to lead Iran after the Ayatollah was killed, but then they killed all of them in subsequent airstrikes. So, Elise, I mean, you hear this, and what do you think is really going on at the White House, at the Pentagon, as they're strategizing about the way forward?
Well, I think you heard from both Secretary Rubio and also from Elbridge Colby, who's the Undersecretary of Defense for Policy, who was testifying on the Hill the other day. It really seems as if there are two military objectives, right? The U.S. objective is a very military targeted, the Navy, the missiles, the launchers, really eliminating the possible weapons threat by Iran. The Israelis, and the nuclear. In addition to that, is regime change. And so it's not that they're not coordinating, but the Israelis are really shaping the kind of direction of how this goes. And, you know, the administration did not necessarily want regime change, but this is where we're headed. They want to find someone that they can talk to, and the Israelis keep killing everybody. And so this is really the problem right now. And as Kiman will say, it's like at some point there'll be someone who will say uncle, but until then they're just killing layer by layer by layer. This is not, if you are interested in how regime change, it's really about that patient, unglamorous work of diplomacy and reaching out and making context so that you have people you can deal with on the ground.
So Kian, just for the audience, I mean, you were imprisoned in Iran by this regime, and you've been in the United States essentially since you were freed. I want to play for you what the foreign minister had to say about how the military campaign is going and whether they're going to be swayed by the bombs dropping in order to change their regime. Listen.
6 days after the war, it is clear that the U.S. Has failed to achieve its main goal, which was a clean, rapid victory.
Your supreme leader was killed. Your top military leaders were killed. Your military installations have been bombed. How can you call that a failure?
Well, then what they have achieved? What was their goal? They came here for a regime change, perhaps. They came here for a rapid victory so they can, control everything. But they have failed. The system is working. The commanders have been replaced, and the supreme leader is going to be replaced soon.
So, Kian, you know this regime well, you know the resistance well. Do you think that Trump can actually decide who's next?
Well, it's quite an astonishing development to hear that that's what he wants to do. But before I give you my interpretation, I'd just like to say that, my perspective on this whole Iran thing is shaped by the fact that I was a political prisoner in Iran for my democracy activist work. As far as I know, I was the longest held American citizen imprisoned by the Iranian regime for democracy activism, human rights work, and for advocating for better relations with the United States. I spent over a year in Evin prison, including 8 in solitary confinement, up close and personal with the IRGC officers. I spent countless hours and countless months being interrogated by middle-level and senior-level IRG officers. So I got a real sense, more close than I really had wanted to, but to the way they think. Now, they accused me of regime change. They accused all civil society actors in Iran of working towards regime change. Anyone that was connected with the United States was accused of regime change. And I will just say, Abby, me, like maybe 50% or 60% of Iranian population, they dream of regime change. We've dreamed of a more democratic and free Iran. But the reality is that we experienced the brutality of the regime when we tried to rise up. I was arrested after the 2009 Green Movement. Maybe some people don't remember that, but millions of people poured into the streets demanding greater accountable government in Iran. The government completely cracked down, closed down all opposition parties, all opposition newspapers. In other words, made any kind of reform impossible. And what we saw, unfortunately, a month ago was this unprecedented brutality in the Middle East and certainly in the history of Iran, where perhaps 10,000 people were killed in 2 days. And so the question of regime change from someone who has struggled for a better Iran, for a more free Iran, it looks very different. And I'll just say, after the brutality, many Iranians, including me, felt that there was really perhaps no other way to dislodge this regime except via external force. That comes with many complications and worries, but that's kind of where we are.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that because, I mean, I think what kind of external force also is an open question, Robbie.
Look, I have so much respect for what Kian went through and the fact that you're here telling your story to us. But as an observer of foreign affairs and foreign policy, we're in a very dangerous moment. I want to remind everyone, we've had a head of state kill another head of state. This is illegal domestically. It's illegal internationally. This has huge repercussions. Iran is lashing out across the region, 14 countries that it's attacked so far. And I'll just remind everyone that when Trump says we're ahead of schedule, we don't know what the schedule is. No one knows what the schedule is. No one knows what the plan is. The plan has changed in public several times over. First, it was regime change. Then they realized they can't actually do that because the regime has multiple fail-safes and will survive.
Yeah.
There's no end game. Nothing has been declared in public. This could easily go sideways. It's extremely dangerous, the path we're headed down. And I'll remind everyone, Iran, as it lashes out, we're in a missile math race right now, where you've got Israel and the United States trying to take out Iran's missile launchers before they run out of missile defense.
Right.
And that
Which
game
could
plays
happen
out
in a
this
matter
week.
of just a couple of weeks.
Exactly.
And
it's also
drones are so ubiquitous.
The drones are ubiquitous. They're cheap. One of Iran's drones can cost $20,000. It could cost $1 million to take that down. And that is what Iran is sending out across the Gulf. It's extremely dangerous. If Iranian people try to resist right now, I mean, the Basij, the IRGC, all of them could crack down once again. So I think it's actually reckless for Trump to call for regime change in this way.
Well, he's not calling directly for regime change, to be clear. Even in the statement with Axios.
He's actually said directly.
I'm sorry, even in the Axios. But I'm sorry, the quote from Axios
Explain
not that
how
he was going to personally choose who was going to take over. What he was saying, he made a very direct reference to what happened in Venezuela, saying he wants a say. And I think part of the context of that is because he wants to make sure that whomever is coming into that
called for
position.
regime
I'm
change.
sorry, Jason.
Let me fact check you on
come
that.
on.
He is not.
Jason,
you're saying
let's
he
be
directly
honest.
called for
Let's be
regime
honest.
change.
He said, okay, he said he has to personally have a role in picking Iran's new leader. That's the first thing he said. The other thing,
role. He's not saying
Okay.
he's the
I'm
one
sorry,
who's
in the
making
past
decisions.
week-
But the reason
in the past week, he has called for
I don't
regime
understand
change.
what you're saying.
He
Are
has.
you suggesting
He
that the
has.
administration has not just said they want regime change, they've actually carried out an operation that has killed
Well, that was
the
the
Ayatollah.
Israelis.
So,
But they have called them.
that's
But
separate
Abby, the
things,
reason why
right?
the reason why actually you are
That has
able to
actually
say that is
happened.
because the administration has said so many things. They actually cannot keep their story straight. 2 days ago, yesterday, this morning, I was told we were not at war. Today in the press conference, Pete Hegseth says, "In the war." Are we at war? Are we not at war? Do we want regime change or do we not?
The president told the Iranian people in his very first remarks, on this, he said, now is the time to rise up and take over your country. Look, it's not a question. I mean, look, we can debate whether regime change is good or bad, but it seems very clear that the president signaled from the outset that his hope was that there would be regime change. And then he signaled again today that not only was he okay with some kind of change, but he wanted to be the person who determined.
But so that is different than calling for regime change war. Wanting the regime to change, I think every normal person in this country and around the globe understands that the people in charge right now are evil, murderous, and they've been ruling this country with oppression.
So then you just take them out?
Let's go back to what I was saying earlier,
no, see-
that the Israelis are, it doesn't matter really what the U.S., whether they want regime change or not, because the Israelis do. And so Trump...
The Iranian people also want regime change
yes, they
overwhelmingly.
do, but I'm not sure
Then
that they
let them
want...
do it.
They want to be able to...
But as I mentioned,
let me let
we
Kian.
can't. I don't. So what the brutality. My experience has shown that there is a situation, unfortunately, where the balance of forces inside a country are so skewed against the people who are unarmed, who are disorganized. In other words, they don't have access to political parties, they don't have access to newspapers, they don't have the ability to organize or mobilize. They are so weak in relation to this the regime that they really cannot dodge it. Can I just say something about war? I mean, I think it's very interesting.
the parsing of the language.
Well, the question, I mean, I know this may sound controversial, and a number of, among my friends,
Bring it.
some of them is controversial.
That's
But
okay.
I think that a lot of commentary is missing, perhaps, the big picture.
I agree.
And there is a big picture here, and perhaps to simplify it, I would put it this way. I don't think it's right to say that President Trump has started a war with Iran. I think President Trump wants to finish a war that Iran started in 1979, 47 years ago. And these aren't just words. Let me just tell you an anecdote. In the 2003, 2004, when I was there in Iran, working on projects at a very high level, I was talking with deputy ministers, I was talking with, going back and forth, and I was in the foreign ministry in Tehran, where I met someone who was very senior, and he was semi-sympathetic with the projects we were doing. But as I was leaving, he looked me in the eye, and he said, "You as an Iranian American, I want you to know something and listen very carefully." He said, "We in this building," and what he meant is the foreign ministry, which meant representing the government, which means representing the regime. He said, "We believe we are at war with the United States." He said at that time, "It's a Cold War, but it's a war nonetheless." This
I
was
know,
a
but
warning
think
time.
that-
I'll just remind you all, Trump called it a war.
I think it's
Let
inevitable.
me let Elise respond really
Just
quickly.
super quick. I think it's inevitable that we'd be coming to this point. Okay. I think at some point a U.S.
Yes.
president would be involved in strikes against Iran, and it does turn out that President.
I disagree.
I think at some
I
point.
think it might be inevitable, and I totally.
I'm not
respect
sure
your-
I feel comfortable with where we are right now, and I definitely don't feel comfortable with the messaging or the
All right, let me let
Can I-
Ashley
can I- 'cause you-
respond, and
because
then
you
we'll
responded
pick it
to
up when we
something
come
that's
back from the
outside.
break.
And I respect your position. I respect your experience, and I actually try and listen to people who have been directly impacted in situations to inform my opinion. I might not even disagree with your point about there's always been this hostility, and there might be a position that Donald Trump is trying to finish. I think the way you go about it matters. I think what your end game matters. And I think the American people deserve that because our Constitution does say we are permitted that. And I don't think this administration has done that. And I think the slippery slope, and I don't like to compare Iran to or America to other countries, but I think we do have a democracy that I cherish so much. And we have a Constitution that I would hope our president follows. And at times, I think he doesn't. And I think it is a slippery slope that doesn't just put Americans in harm's way, but it puts Iranians in harm's way when he tells them he will be there for them. And they rise up and he waits weeks. And those are killed in the street. That is my concern.
All right, we'll pick up this fascinating conversation on the other side of the break.
So, for me personally, first of all, I want to start with Jason Rantz, the stupid comment that he tried to make when the entire panel was like, huh, what? This is the modern day MAGA. This is how they are. Whatever Donald Trump does, whatever Donald Trump says, they're going to bootlick and they are going to defend until the cows come home. This is MAGA. This is how they act, and this is the way that it is that they conduct themselves. Donald Trump has most definitely said in ways and in means that this is a regime change. So the fact that Jason Rantz just tried to come out with that statement, oh, we never said this is a regime change, is 100% lie. But what do I always say on this channel about MAGA? MAGA lie because they are dependent upon the fact that their base do not ever push back or question them. But other people that are outside of MAGA, we will question and we will push back. So he tried to say a lie there, but he was fact-checked brutally by Abby Phillip. So bravo to Abby Phillip. What I will say in regards to the individual who was a political prisoner, respect for what it is that he went through. I don't want to try and disrespect him in any way, shape or form. But just because he went through what it is that he went through, that does not mean that justifying Donald Trump's illegal actions is something that he can do. The reality is this is an illegal war. Many people have said it, and the only people that are trying to defend it are people that are in defense of Donald Trump. There is no defending this. There is no defending this administration and what it is that they're doing. Like I believe her name is Ashley Allison. Like she said, there's a way and there's a means of how it is that you go about doing things. Okay. One of the things that it is that we know that the Constitution says that the president has to go to Congress to be able to get the authority to start a war. But what it is that they're trying to do is they're trying to play on words and say that it's not a war. But the reality is this: Pete Hegseth, Marco Rubio, and Donald Trump have consistently slipped up and called it a war repeatedly and multiple times. So they're just trying to be slick in the way in which and the manner in which they go about doing it. So it's just interesting to me, and I don't believe that, regardless of the gentleman's previous experience being held as a political prisoner within Iran, it doesn't justify anything. And him saying that Donald Trump isn't starting a war just because of the fact there's been tensions over a number of decades, he is starting a war. It's not even a question. Donald Trump is most definitely starting a war, and it's never going to end well for him simply because it's a direct contradiction of what he ran his campaign on. No new wars. You know, Stephen Miller getting up on stage and saying that if you elect Kamala Harris is going to send your children to war. But the reality is this administration are sending young Americans to war. Not only are they doing that, they're also turning around and trying to justify it. Donald Trump saying it's going to happen, you know, literally speaking about it so flippantly, like it's absolutely nothing. But that should be no shocker, right, to any of us. That is Donald Trump, and that is MAGA. This is how these guys are. They don't care about anybody except themselves. Let me know your guys' thoughts on this exchange, this clip in the comment section below. As usual, Jason Rantz just completely humiliating himself, making himself look like more of a Burke than he actually is. But while you guys are in the comment section, do me a favor and hit the thumbs up button purely for the YouTube algorithm, and hit subscribe if you're interested and open to an outsider's point of view on American politics and all things to do with MAGA and Donald Trump and anti-Donald Trump. Appreciate you guys. See you guys in the next clip.